I'm Coach Garza. I'm a strength and conditioning specialist, and I'm here to help you and your athletes with 4 easy ways for better squats. First thing we're looking for is the hip placement. When you ask your athletes to do a squat, are they hinging at the hip or are they sitting? Okay, if they're doing number 2, then we need to correct that. A squat starts with a hinge of the hip. So we take our hands like blades, we press our hips back. This is where your squat can begin. If you're having trouble getting your athletes to really hinge at the hip, try to tell them to send their butt back instead of telling them to sit down. This will relieve some of the pressure that your athletes feel in the knees, especially when they are doing weighted or loaded squats. The second thing you can do for better squats from your athletes is look at their feet. So some strength coaches prefer a foot position that is facing straight forward, while others allow and prefer one that is more natural to the athlete. I'm going to encourage you to allow an athlete to squat in a position that is comfortable for their individual hip rotation. For me, my squat position is a little bit turned out, and that just allows my knees to track over the toes in a way that feels comfortable for me and a way that allows me to utilize both my quads and my hamstrings most efficiently and produce the most power. For me, if I turn my feet forward, I'm not able to get into as comfortable a squat, and I have a lot of unnecessary pressure on the knee. Talking about the feet brings me to watching your athlete's knees. When I squat, I want my knees to track just over the toes. So because my feet are in a slightly turned out position, my knees are in a slightly turned out position. This should actually be true of every athlete. It encourages them to engage their glutes and make sure that they're really utilizing all of the power from this squat and power position. Okay, so as I follow my knees, I want to watch my athletes. Are their knees collapsing in? Are they pressing too far out? These could all be signs and indicators of a lack of flexibility, either at the hip, at the knee, or at the ankle. So ideally speaking, I want all of the knee to track very nicely over the toe. Last thing, and probably one of the most debated things about squat, is the depth of the squat. I always recommend, especially for new weightlifters or kids, athletes who are new to strength training, that you always use a target. So I'm actually going to use a wall ball as a target today. So when you are looking for depth, a lot of coaches use milk crates. I think that's a great thing. It's great to have your athletes use a target to know how far they need to go in order to really get the benefit of a squat. But do you need to go that far to receive the benefit? Not if it's going to challenge your technique in the squat. Let's talk about that. An ideal squat at optimal depth is going to be one that allows the athlete to keep the top of the head in line with the tailbone. It's going to be one where the athlete is able to maintain stability in the hip and stability in the knees as well as the ankles. And let's face it, not all of us are there. Some of us lack flexibility in our ankles or our knees. Some of us are new to learning these things, and so it's really a struggle for us. So it's important that we know that a shallower squat to a target for an athlete who is new to this can be just as beneficial as a squat to a depth that is appropriate, especially for someone who is new to this kind of training. Our goal as coaches is to make sure that our first 3 things, our hips, our feet, and our knees, are in an optimal place and a place that can be built upon, and then we can look at depth. So for example, if I am an athlete who goes for the optimal depth, but it requires me to collapse my spine, I should not be going that far. If I can go for the optimal depth, but it requires my knees to collapse in, I should not be going that far. Instead, as coaches, we can encourage our athletes to utilize something taller, like for example, a box, where I can maintain the hip hinge, I can maintain a good foot placement, and I can maintain great knee placement, and then recover in the same way some would from an optimal depth squat. Okay, I know I said this was 4, but I guess this is 4.5. The last thing is that recovery from a squat for every athlete should be the same if you want the most out of your squatting technique, if you want the most out of this practice. So when I do my squat, whether it is to a ball, whether it is to a box, when I sit, I want to stand up and squeeze, making sure that my hips come all the way through to a forward position, really squeezing my glutes. This is going to provide an exercise and power in my glutes so that when I do fire in a game time situation, when I do fire for a different type of jump, when I fire for coming off the line, I can have that power not only through my quads and my hamstrings, but also through all 3 parts of my glutes. And there you go, 4 steps, 4.5 steps to better squats and better coaching for you and your athletes. Guys, it has been a pleasure to do this today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here and I'm happy to help. So have a great one.